Hey guys, greetings to all and welcome back to another video of our channel Doctors. So in today's video, we will be completing the chapter The Living World in 35 crisp pointers. So without wasting much time, let us move on to our pointers. Now before we move on to the 35 pointers of our chapter The Living World, I want you to note 4 important points about Ernst Mayr, and they are: Ernst Mayr was known as the Darwin of the 20th century. Point number 2 is he was given the title Alexander Agassiz Professor of Zoology Emeritus. Point number 3 is he accepted the definition of biological species. Point number 4 is he was awarded with 3 prizes known as the Triple Crown of Biology, and they were the Balzan Prize in 1983, the International Prize for Biology in 1994, and the Crawford Prize in 1999. I've also written the points here in short. Now let's move on to the 35 pointers of our chapter Living World. So our pointer number 1 is increase in mass and increase in number of individuals are twin characteristics of growth. Sometimes they might just ask you that what are the twin characteristics of growth. So our answer will be increase in mass and increase in number are the twin characteristics of growth. Moving to our pointer number 2, which is non-living objects also grow if we take increase in body mass as a criterion for growth. For example, mountains, boulders and sand molds do grow. However, this kind of growth exhibited by non-living objects is by accumulation of material on the surface. Pointer number 3, growth therefore cannot be taken as a defining property of living organisms. In this part, we will be focusing on characteristics, and then we will be determining which amongst them is a defining feature of living organisms. Now for a characteristic to become a defining feature of living organisms, it should be accepted by all living organisms without any exception, and it should not be accepted by any non-living organism. As we can see, since here growth is also shown by non-living objects, therefore growth cannot be taken as a defining property of living organisms. Let us move on to our next characteristic, reproduction, and pointer number 4, which is when it comes to unicellular organisms like bacteria, unicellular algae or amoeba, reproduction is synonymous with growth, that is increase in number of cells. Now in my mock test I had a question where they asked which organism shows reproduction synonymous with growth, and I had various examples out of which one was amoeba. So amoeba will be your answer. So you can be asked such questions based on this pointer number 4. Let us now move on to pointer number 5, which is growth and reproduction. There are many organisms which do not reproduce. Example, mules, sterile worker bees, infertile human couples, etc. As I mentioned earlier, for a characteristic to become a defining feature of living organisms, it should be accepted by all living organisms. And as we know, since there are certain infertile human couples, mules and sterile worker bees which cannot reproduce, therefore reproduction also cannot be an all-inclusive defining characteristic of living organisms. Let us move on to our next characteristic, which is metabolism. Coming to pointer number 6, it is the sum total of all chemical reactions occurring in our body is metabolism. Metabolic reactions can be demonstrated outside the body in cell-free systems also. Coming to pointer number 7, which is since metabolism is a defining feature of all living organisms without exception, isolated metabolic reactions in vitro are not living things but surely living reactions. So from this we come to know that metabolism is also a defining feature of living organisms. Coming on to our next characteristic, which is cellular organization, and continuing pointer number 7, which is cellular organization of the body is also a defining feature of living forms. They've given only one line, so I'll now move on to pointer number 8, which is all living organisms from the prokaryotes to the most complex eukaryotes can sense and respond to environmental cues. Therefore, consciousness becomes the defining property of living organisms. Out of all the characteristics we learned, I will say that consciousness is the most important one. So let us recall all the characteristics, which were growth, reproduction, metabolism, cellular organization and consciousness. Out of these, only metabolism, cellular organization and consciousness were the defining features of living organisms, growth and reproduction are not the defining features of living organisms. Coming to pointer number 9, which is based on a numerical data, which is the number of species that are known and described range between 1.7 to 1.8 million, and this refers to biodiversity or the number and types of organisms present on Earth. Sometimes there is question based on numerical data asked on need, so I would recommend you to remember this point. Now moving on to pointer number 10, which is, since there is such a big biodiversity, there is a need to standardize the naming of living organisms such that a particular organism is known by the same name all over the world. This process is called as nomenclature. So in short, nomenclature is nothing but the process of naming an organism. Obviously, nomenclature or naming is only possible when the organism is described correctly and we know to what organism the name is attached to. This process is known as identification. Then let's come to the first process of identification, which is the biological nomenclature given by Carlos Linnaeus. And coming to pointer number 12, which is each name has two components, the generic name and the specific epithet. This system of providing name with two components is called biological nomenclature. This naming system was given by Carlos Linnaeus. Now in pointer number 11, I have mentioned some acronyms whose full forms you must remember at any cost. First acronym is ICBN, which stands for International Code for Botanical Nomenclature. ICZN, which stands for International Code for Zoological Nomenclature. ICVN, which stands for International Code for Viral Nomenclature, and ICNB, which stands for International Code for Nomenclature of Bacteria. Pointer number 13 consists of some universal rules of binomial nomenclature which were given by Carlos Linnaeus, and the rules are as follows. Rule number 1 is biological names are generally in Latin and written in italics because they are Latinized or derived from Latin irrespective of their origin. Rule number 2 is the first word in a biological name represents the genus while the second component denotes the specific epithet. Rule number 3 is both the words in the biological name when handwritten are underlined separately or printed in italics to indicate their Latin origin. Rule number 4 is the first word denoting the genus starts with a capital letter while the specific epithet starts with a small letter. It can be illustrated with the example of Mangifera indica. Pointer number 14 says that this process of classification by which anything is grouped into convenient characteristics based on some easily observable characters. So classification is the process by which we place the organisms into groups. Now the scientific term for these groups or categories is taxon. Pointer number 16 is hence based on characteristics all living organisms can be classified into different taxa or categories, and this process of classification is known as taxonomy. So we place organisms into various categories. These categories are called taxa, and the process of placing them into different categories is called taxonomy. Moving on to pointer number 17, which says that hence characterization, identification, classification and nomenclature are the processes that are basic to taxonomy. So there might be a question asked that what are the basics of taxonomy, and your answer will be characterization, identification, classification and nomenclature. Moving to pointer number 18, it says that this branch of study is referred to as systematics. The word systematics is derived from the Latin word systema, which means systematic arrangement of organisms. Linnaeus used Systema Naturae as the title of his publication. Pointer number 19 is systematics takes into account evolutionary relationships between organisms. So systematics is a branch of study which studies the evolutionary relationship between different organisms. And as we know, this word systematics is derived from the Latin word systema. Moving on to pointer number 20, it states that since a category is a part of overall taxonomic arrangement, it is called as the taxonomic category, and all the categories together constitute the taxonomic hierarchy. Each category is referred to as a unit of classification. In fact, it represents a rank and is commonly termed as taxon, whose plural form is taxa, which we already learned in the previous page. Moving on to pointer number 21, which is about our first taxon, that is species. Since we already learnt about taxonomic hierarchy, let us now move on to the ranks in the taxonomic hierarchy, which is species. Pointer number 21 says that species is the most basic unit of classification. Taxonomic studies consider a group of individual organisms with fundamental similarities called as species. Now there are certain examples like Mangifera indica, Solanium tuberosum potato and Panthera leo lion. What you need to focus on in these examples that the second name in the scientific name denotes the specific epithet, whereas the first word in the scientific name denotes their genus. Now again one point to remember is that each genus can have more than one specific epithet. For example, Panthera has another specific epithet called tigris. Even Solanium includes species like Nigrum and Melogena. Similarly, human beings belong to the species Sapiens, which is grouped in the genus Homo. Therefore, we get a scientific name which is Homo sapiens. Now, let us move on to the next rank or taxon, which is genus. Genus comprises a group of related species which has more characteristics in common in comparison to species of other genera. Here also there are examples like potato and brinjal. They have two different species but they both belong to the same genus Solania. As I explained to you in the earlier example that one genus can have more than two specific epithets. Similarly, potato and brinjal, though they have different species, they belong to the same genus which is Solania. Next example is Panthera leo, Panthera padres which is leopard and Panthera tigris which is tiger. They all have the same genus but belong to different species. This genus differs from another genus Felis which includes cats. Moving on to our next taxon in taxonomic hierarchy, which is family. Now, family is a group of related genera with still less number of similarities as compared to genus and species. For example, three different genera, that is Solanium, Petunia and Datura, are placed in the family Solanaceae. In animals, genus Panthera, comprising of lion, tiger, leopard, is put along with genus Felis, which stands for cats, in the family Felidae. Therefore, we more commonly say that lion and cats, they belong to the same family. But Felidae is separated from the family Canidae, which stands for dogs. Let us recall, family is a group of related genera. Three different genera of plants, that is Solanium, Petunia and Datura, are placed in the family Solanaceae. Whereas in animals, the cat family, that is Felis, and the genus Panthera, comprising of lion, tiger and leopard, are put together in the family Felidae. But cats and dogs are put in separate families, that is Felidae and Canidae. Therefore, once they asked a question, that is, what is the common taxon in cats and tiger? And our answer was family. Why? Because they placed them in the same family, which is Felidae. Moving on to pointer number 24. Coming to the next taxon in a taxonomic hierarchy, which is order. Now, order consists of related families put together in one category. Since order, being a higher category, is the assemblage of families which exhibit a few similar characters. The similar characters are less in number as compared to different genera included in a family. Now, examples are plant families like Convoluaceae, Solanaceae are included in the order Polymnials, mainly based on floral characteristics, whereas in animals, the order Carnivora includes the families Felidae and Canidae. So remember, cats and tigers were placed in the same family, whereas cats and dogs are placed in the same order, which is carnivora. So sometimes they might ask you questions based on these two examples, so make sure you remember them. I will now explain to you the next categories, which are phylum and kingdom, real quick. Now, as we learned that each category comprises of related previous categories, similarly phylum also comprises related class and kingdom comprises of related groups of phylum. But what is more important to remember is mentioned in pointer number 26, which says that as we go from species to kingdom, that is, as we move from down to upwards, the number of common characteristics goes on decreasing, which was mentioned in every category. Lower the taxa, more the number of common characteristics. Therefore, I can say that species has the maximum number of common characteristics, whereas kingdom has the least number of common characteristics, which is also written in NCERT, which I will say as we go higher from species to kingdom, the number of common characteristics goes on decreasing. Lower the taxa, more are the characteristics that the members within the taxon share. Higher the category, greater is the difficulty of determining the relationship to other taxa at the same level, which clearly explains what I told you, that as we move upwards from species to kingdom, the number of common characteristics decrease. And remember, species has the maximum number of common characteristics, whereas kingdom has the least number of common characteristics. We will now move on to pointer number 7. Now in pointer number 7 we have this table 1.1, which I will not be explaining today. I will put up the tricks to memorize this table in another video, and to memorize figure 1.1 to remember the sequence of the taxonomic hierarchy. Let us now move on to taxonomical aids. Let us now move on to our first taxonomic aid, which is herbarium. And pointer number 28 is herbarium is a storehouse of collected plant specimens that are dried, pressed and preserved on sheets. Further, coming to pointer number 29, it says that the herbarium sheets also carry a label providing information about date and place of collection, English, local and botanical names of the plant specimen collected, family of the collected specimen and the collector's name. Therefore, herbaria also serve as a quick reference system in taxonomical studies. So mainly coming to the questions asked in herbarium, they ask questions on what information does a herbarium sheet provide us. So you need to remember that it has the date and place of collection, English, local and botanical names, the family of the collected specimen and the collector who has, and the name of the collector who has collected the specimen. Moving on to our next taxonomical aid, which is botanical gardens. Now, botanical gardens has the collection of living plants. These specialized gardens have collections of living plants for reference. Now, we have three famous examples of botanical gardens. The one in England at Kew, the Indian Botanical Garden, Howrah in India, and the National Botanical Research Institute in Lucknow in India. Moving on to our third taxonomical aid, which is museum. Now, museum has specimens of plants and animals. Let me just quickly revise. In herbarium, we had preserved plant specimens only. In botanical gardens, we had living plants only. And in museum, we have specimens of both preserved plants as well as preserved animals. Museums have collections of preserved plant and animal specimens for study and reference. Specimens are preserved in the containers or jars in preservative solutions. Plant and animal specimens may also be preserved as dry specimens, whereas insects are preserved in insect boxes after collecting, killing and pinning them. Now, museums often have collections of skeletons of animals too. Coming to our next taxonomical aid, which is zoological parks, and pointer number 32. These zoological parks are commonly called as zoos. These are the places where wild animals are kept in protected environments under human care, which enable us to learn about their food habits and behavior. So zoological parks also has living animals, and it is also a part of ex-situ conservation. Ex-situ means conservation of animals or plants outside their natural habitat. So botanical gardens and zoological parks both are example of ex-situ conservation. In zoological parks, animals are provided as far as possible the conditions similar to their natural habitats. Moving on to our next taxonomical aid, which is keys. This taxonomical aid is the most important out of all the taxonomical aids that we studied. So key is another taxonomical aid which is used for identification of plants and animals based on similarities and dissimilarities. The keys are based on contrasting characters, generally in a pair, and this pair is called as couplet. Each statement in the key is called a lead. So each statement, that is each contrasting statement, is called a lead, and such pairs of contrasting statements are called as couplet. Now keys are analytical in nature. So these are some points that you need to remember about keys. Firstly, that they are based on similarities and dissimilarities. Secondly, they are written in contrasting characters in a pair called couplet. Third, that each statement in a key is called as a lead. And fourth, that keys are generally analytical in nature. Now what information does the key provide? Separate taxonomic keys are required for each taxonomic category such as family, genus and species for identification purposes. So these were our pointers number 33 and 34. Moving on to our last pointer, which is pointer number 35. We talk about some other taxonomical aids, that is flora, manuals, monographs and catalogs are some other means of recording descriptions. Flora contains the actual account of habitat and distribution of plants of a given area. Manuals are useful in providing information for identification of names of species found in an area, whereas monographs, they contain information on any one taxon. So these are like just one line definitions of flora, manuals and monographs that you need to remember because they are asked more frequently in NEET. I have also written some short pointers, that is flora means information and description about plants. Fauna means information and description about animals. Manuals gives us information about species in a given area. They are not specified which species, so we will just generally study. It gives us information on species in a given area. Monographs gives us information about any one taxon. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if so, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss any notification. But before that, make sure that you have joined our Telegram channel. For all those who don't know what Telegram is, you can go to the Play Store, search Telegram and then download the app with this icon. There you can directly search the name of our YouTube channel or click the invite link which is there in the description box. On Telegram, I post the notes of each class in PDF format, so you can either download my notes or make your own notes. But don't go, cause I have a song for you. So that's all for today guys. I'll see you in the next video. Till then, stay tuned, keep studying and Jai Hind.